Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we make custom Corian paint-filled signage. If you're not familiar with what Corian is a solid surface material. So it's what they use, like say for kitchens, for the countertops. It sands really, really nice. It's almost like wood. It's made from compressed acrylic, and you can get it in a bunch of different textures. So in this case here, instead of actually using stone that would look like this is actually compressed plastic or acrylic. Now in this project here specifically, we had a few different plaques to make. Here's one here, and there's another one here. And something that makes this sort of a little bit unique is that we also had to create the beveled edge. You can definitely see it here. A nice clean beveled edge all the way around. Now to create a beveled edge, you need some good tooling to be able to do that. So I used my CNC router behind me to cut out the shape and also do the beveled edge. What that allows me to do is have absolute precision. That's why this oval is a perfect oval. There's no real way of doing that that I could think of with manual tools or power tools to that level of precision. It's a little bit tricky with Corian because it is such a heavy material, especially when you get it by the sheet, which is what we did for this job here. Through the years, I've really come to enjoy being able to work with solid surface materials such as Corian. There's a whole bunch of other different brand names, all basically the same stuff, compressed acrylic. And what I really like about this material is how easy it is to work with. It sands wonderfully. If you have the proper bit when you're cutting it, the edge results are nice and shiny as well. And you pretty much do anything you do with wood, you can with Corian. The other advantage to Corian as well is you could also bend it. We haven't had any applications that require that, but I have the tooling here to do that if that was ever a requirement. The other nice thing about Corian that I really like is that it laser engraves wonderfully. You don't have any burning or charring or any of that kind of stuff. So when you're doing the router work, everything's nice and clean. Then when you do the laser work, everything's nice and clean as well. If I were doing the same thing with wood, for instance here you'd have a bunch of wood chips, not much of a difference from the Corian or compressed acrylic chips. But then you have the strength of the Corian. It's very, very strong. So I only need like a couple of tabs all around. Now if I go to the laser with the wood, now I have smoke and other stuff I gotta sand it or do a bunch of other work. While if I just use Corian, I don't have any of that stuff to really contend with. I do a bit of sanding anyways, but when you apply masking over Corian, because the material is so consistent, it's very, very clean and it goes flat across the whole surface. What you sometimes have with wood is that it lifts here and there, so you end up with a couple of smoke stains here and there that need to be sanded off. But it's not a problem with Corian. The other nice thing about Corian is when you do a profile with it, you don't end up with that chipping that you get on all the edges. Everything is nice and clean. So this is a man-made material, and it really shows because it is very consistent in density, and that's why it's so easy to work with here in the shop. When it comes to Corian, the other thing you keep in mind, it does have some weight to it, and that's really, really nice because when you give it to somebody, it has some sort of gravitas. So what I'm doing here is actually removing all the tabs all the way around. I have the vacuum system, but it's not enough for something like this here because Corian is incredibly brittle, but also very hard. And so you just have a couple little tabs and it holds it perfectly until the whole production is done. And then all you do afterwards is just sand the tabs off like I'm doing here. And you have a nice clean surface after a little bit of sanding. Corian is available in like hundreds of different textures and varieties and that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy working with it for this application here, which is making custom plaques. So after the router did its job, I ended up with blanks of the different shapes that I needed to be done. The next step was actually doing the laser engraving. Now let's see if the close-up works. There we go. So it's roughly, let's say, a little bit less than 1/8 deep, and the paint filling is done in that depth. So when it comes to laser engraving, the nice thing about it is that you have everything nice and sharp. Now you can look here, you'll see the T, the end of it is sharp. So is the S, everything's nice and perfect. And you can't really do that with a router because you're always limited by a round bit. Now there are some sort of ways of sneaking around that issue, by using angled bits and a bunch of other stuff. but it never comes to the same level of precision you get from the laser. The other nice thing about the laser is it actually creates a nice rough texture in the bottom. So you can sort of see here. It almost looks like sandpaper. And that's what the laser does on Corian. And I just really love that texture. If we do it with the router, the problem with the router is you have a bit that goes through and it creates a completely flat surface. So basically you end up with the same sort of polished look at the bottom here, and then you do the paint filling, and it's just a plain boring surface, at least in my opinion. We use the laser to do it. It's a lot slower, it takes a lot more time to do, of course, but you have a nice texture to what you do with the paint filling. You can really see it here with the acorns. Get the focus, there you go. So you can see it's just a little bit of extra, aesthetic to the piece that you wouldn't have if we did the whole thing using just our CNC router. Now you notice the Corian here has almost like a paper over it, and that's a masking. What the masking does, it's not really like for wood. For wood you put masking over it for the smoke stains and all that kind of stuff you don't want to have on the surface of the material. When it comes to Corian, the reason I do that is because I'm doing a paint fill, and I've done paint filling with it and without it, and it's just a lot easier just to do the paint filling with the masking. So I spray it all in, or I apply it with a brush depending on what kind of fill I'm doing on this project. And then after that you just remove the masking, you give it a quick sand, and you're pretty much done. It's a lot less painful than doing the same thing with a wood equivalent. Now the nice thing about laser engraving is everything's nice and sharp. I could technically do this with a router as well, but you won't have the very sharp points that you see here. You also have a resolution issue. The resolution of the laser is maybe what? Like it's less than a fraction of the width or the diameter of a hair. So it's almost nothing. And to use the equivalent with a router, the bit would just always break. So I have a lot more design possibilities using the laser for laser engraving than I do with the router. But that being said, if I had to do like 3D carving and that kind of stuff, the router is definitely the way to go for that, because the laser is not really good for that because there's no two-way feedback system. Here, ovals are always a little bit tricky because you want to make sure everything is straight and parallel. And with like a square or rectangle, that's easy. But with an oval, you can always have it off a couple of degrees here and there. Something that I've started doing with ovals and circles to make sure everything is proper is actually adding little pencil marks. So I have my X and my Y on there. You might be able to, no, you don't see it on the paper. You see it on both ends, the little pencil marks. So then I know exactly, then I'm totally across perfectly. Now for the back of all these plaques, 2 of them actually have magnets, so they can just put it right on the wall and it will stick there. And this one here actually has a picture frame tab, so they could just hang it on the wall as well. But there's a lot of different options when it comes to hanging plaques. And we can also make, because we're making all this stuff in the shop, we can also make a support for the plaque. So if you wanted to stand up, we can make that little support thing for you as well. So as you probably extrapolate from what you've seen here in this video, we can literally make these things into any shape, any size that you want. So let's say you want this in the shape of a dolphin, you want it in the shape of a horse, anything you can totally imagine, including sketches or even just writing. We also make molds out of this for cement. So let's say you have a cement inlay. We can actually do the Corian because it doesn't stick to the cement very well. So it's very easy to take out, and you have your inlay with concrete or cement. So there's endless options that we can offer your company when it comes to making custom Corian work. Contact me at CNCKing.com. We'll make it for you and ship it right to your door.